Good evening, all. Welcome to today's seminar organized by MEQSA as well as Sharif APC Coaching. So I would like to welcome you all to this wonderful evening. I hope today you're all going to learn something better that you have learned previously. So this is going to be a very good interactive session. So before we get into this session, I would like to make sure that whether you all can hear or not. Can you please use chat on the top of your MS Team? You can see chat. Can you please type yes if you can hear clearly and see very clearly? Okay, that's good. Thank you. Fantastic. So I think exactly we are on time, 7 o'clock. So as we have circulated, the session going to be from 7 to 8:30. But normally, I do take more time. Normally, I want to explain a lot of things with an experience and everything to the people. So because of that, I do take more time. But unfortunately, the limited time provided by MEQSA for me to complete this session within 1.5 hours. So let me try to complete it and let's try to learn as much as possible within that time. So variation is one of the very important elements that as a commercial peoples that we do work for the construction industries, we all handle that variation as a very important element. But most of the time, we are unaware what are the situation a contractor or the client or client representative can handle or respond or answer or mitigate or utilize the situation. It's very rare. So that's why RICS, we all know that one of the well-famous international institution, it's focusing its APC candidates or MRICS people wants to know such a fantastic and very important element in a detailed manner. That's why RICS included a very particular subject, which is teaching them how to handle changes in the construction industry. So other than the RICS, there are hundreds of thousands of people we do work in a commercial perspective. So we all want to know what is variations and what kind of things that we need to do, right? So those are the things that we are going to learn today. So then if we are going to learn about variations, why it's not going to be a common one, but it is going to be under FIDIC 1999. So let me explain you one very important element. In the GCC region, I'm not aware from which part of the world that you all are, being at, and you all are trying to attend these lectures. But as we all know that most of the part, especially the region of GCC, they are more spontaneous towards FIDIC, internationally established standard form of contract. So when we learn something standard, which is going to give us a lot of information, not only the event or the situations, what are the things that can raise us or raise any situations where we can identify the changes, but also any standard form of condition of contract that's going to give you a lot of additional information other than the situation changes can happen. For an example, I have listed many of the informations. For an example, what are the situation variations can happen? And who can order the variations? What are the situation a contractor can reject a variation? And what are the other possibilities for the contractor to identify variations? So all these situations were mentioned, identified by FIDIC, and they incorporated these things within the standard form of contract called FIDIC. And FIDIC Redbook, we all know that one. That's they introduced for the purpose of construction only. So most of the construction that we as a commercial people working related to construction only, where the employer will complete the design and they will give the design to the contractor and the contractor will start to do the construction. So for these kind of procurement method, they introduce RICS one book called Standard Form of Contract called FIDIC Redbook. So that book, specially for the contractor who is going to do construction only. So if I'm a consultant or the client, if I sign a contract with the contractor just to do the construction where I told him, right, I'm going to give you all the design, you just need to construct the building, then there will be a chances in most of the situation, right, as a client or class representative, ask the contractor to do a lot of changes to the design which I already gave to him, right? I gave him the design and I asked him to start the work. But while he's doing the work, I'm going to ask him to change a lot of designs and many other things. So that's why most of us, we are struggling and facing such a variations and changes handling as an issue. So here we're going to learn about each and every corner of variations which mention as well as explain under FIDIC 1999. As I said earlier, most of us are working for construction only, where we don't involve in the design. That will be completed by the consultant or the engineer, design client. So that's why I'm focusing on the FIDIC Red Book, which is only for construction. So before we get into that, let's try to understand what is variation. So FIDIC, if you open the FIDIC book, after certain pages, they have mentioned a lot of definition. If you're going to open the book anywhere, if you identify anything as a very important sentence or word, that word will be defined within the FIDIC book. So very first couple of pages, if you open that, of course, definitely that's going to give you a lot of information about what is that, what is this. If it is money, what is that? If it is currency, what is that? If it is working days, what is that? Similar to that, in FIDIC, under point 1.1.6.9, they define what is variation. So simply they define that as in a word. They call it as any changes to the works which is instructed or approved as a variation. So simply they define that variation means any changes to the works which is instructed or approved as a variation. So if you think a bit deeper, right, they mention variation mean any changes to the work. What is the meaning of work? What is work? So again, FIDIC defined what is the meaning of works. Works mean, they mention any permanent construction that you are going to do or any temporary construction work that you are going to do. As a construction industrial peoples, we all know that one. If we are going to construct any building for any of the client, we are not only going to start to construct directly the permanent building, but before we start the construction, we will construct some kind of temporary facilities. For an example, the one of the project which I'm currently working, we told the contractor, right, initially bring your porta cabins, your toilets, facilities, water, some kind of mesh hall or a space for the people to come and sit down. So before you start any groundwork, any construction or anything like that, your people gonna be on the site and they're gonna use that site. While they use, of course, there will be hundreds of resources required. For an example, I can say that in the construction industries, the very first element that we mobilize to the site is, anyone knows that? What we do mobilize to the site, which is toilets. Yeah, that will be the very, very first element that we do mobilize to the site. We are not going to mobilize that to the site as a permanent one. That's going to be a temporary facilities. Once we completed the permanent building, the element will be removed from the place. So works mean, FIDIC defined that works mean any permanent works or temporary works. And variation mean any changes that we are going to instruct to those work, or we are going to approve as a variation to those work, we're going to call it as a variation. So variation under the FIDIC clause 13.1 to 13.3, clearly defining what is the meaning of variation, what are the situations you can consider them as a variation, And if the contractor wants to make any changes, how he can initiate and how those variation will be valid. So if you open the clause 13, it's very clearly informing, giving you guidance, as well as telling you how you should maintain it, manage it, and handle that one. So it's very important. If you open your contract, you might have seen something different, but unfortunately, most of our own tailored contract, which is not standard, but tailored, your employer or yourself or your company develop some kind of contract which is only for your project. You can't use that for something else or someone else or some other projects. That's what we call tailored contract. Most of the time, those contracts, they don't match the requirement or the definition mentioned in the standard form of a contract. It can be FIDIC or JCT, NEC, any other standard form of contract. Because why? This one is not completely practiced or some kind of evolved throughout the period. Standard form of contract means FIDIC throughout the period, hundreds of years or centuries and centuries throughout the period, and the institution released this in a form of contract to the construction market, and they got feedback from the people. The people say that no, this clause doesn't work, that is not going to work, this one is not working. So they got resources and problem. And using that problem, they are trying to identify resolutions or solution, and to make that form of contract good, they made a changes to the form of contract. So throughout hundreds of years, this document evolved. But when you take your tailored contract, you just made it only for that projects, and you're not going to use it for next projects, and all the lesson learned will not be implemented to other evaluated or some kind of developed contract. One example, while I was working for Riyadh Metro, we used one tailored contract, and that contract with lot of information, but still that's got around 96 clauses, but still the 21 clauses of FIDIC did not meet the standard of that clause, that contract. Similar to that, you might have seen many other contract where the standard form of contracts, even though they are with less number of clauses, they are heavier than your tailored contract. So similar to that, FIDIC 1999, from clause 13 to 13.1 to 13.3, clearly giving you a guidance how a variation can be started, how that can be managed, and how that should be completed. So this is what we are going to learn here. So mostly in all of the condition of contract, you will see that there will be a variation clause. There will be a variation clause. Why variation is very important? We all know that one, employers knows at the time of awarding a contract, they made their mind with a certain level. For an example, he say that my windows and everything going to be aluminum. And he used it as a standard, and he signed the contract with the contractor and released it. But after a couple of months, he visited to another country. For an example, he visited to Europe. And he identified a very nice building, or he saw one of the nice building where the windows and doors, everything made by wood. Then he got an idea, right? My building also very nice, but I'm installing all of them as aluminium. Why don't I try to change that as a wood? So he will come back to the KSA or GCC where he lives. He will come back and he will identify, right? Okay, he will come and tell contractor, can you please change that aluminium window to wood? Then he will tell that, oh, Mr. Employer, please stop that. We sign a contract where you say that you want a window. And also in your condition of contract, you did not mention any provisions or any clauses where you mention you have authority to change any of those things. You did not mention anything. So how you can change that? It's already fixed. So most of the contract, in order to considering these kind of unforeseen changes or any other unpredicted changes, most of the contracts will have such a variation clauses. But unfortunately, you sign a contract without variation. So what you will do? What are the alternatives that you have? You need to make an amendment to your contract to do how to process any variation after that. So it's very important make sure that if you are going to sign a contract or advise any of your people to do any of the condition of contract, you need to be very careful about certain number of clauses to be included, standard clauses. So that's why in RICS we do teach the people, where we do tell them, if you are going to advise any of your employer, or if you're going to select any of the condition of contract for any works, make sure that you are going to compare the condition of contract that you are going to implement for your contract with a standard form of contract. Why? Standard form of contracts practiced throughout hundreds of years, and they incorporated almost all the problems and they have solution with that. So that's why whenever you draft any condition of contract, try to match that or compare that. And did I include this clause? Did I include this clause? Did I include this clause? You can change all the wording, but make sure that you are including all the clauses within that. So very important. If your employer released or sign a contract without variation, definitely you need to expect in future there will be hundreds of changes, and hundreds of changes will be there. In order to handle them, there should be a clause. Otherwise, there is a possibilities for the contractor to come back and tell us, right, in your contract you didn't tell, right, you have authority to change anything. Because of that, we are not going to change anything. So make sure, right, you are going to advise your client or whoever it is to do such a thing. So if you take FIDIC, variation expressively giving chance for the client to execute any changes he wants, but variation limiting certain procedures. As a contractor, the opposite party or the privy to the contract, the person who is going to sign the contract, he is not going to accept everything that you are going to put or mention within the condition of contract. Yeah, expect. So he will also make some comments, but most of the time they don't find any of such a problem, because most of the well-established client, they use standard form of contract, which is well familiar to the contractor, where the contractor knows all the risk and everything, and they do think these standard form of contracts are very nicely in a fair manner. The risk and everything is allocated between the parties, not all the risk to the contractor or not all the risk to the employer, but both parties are sharing that. But however, you need to be very careful whenever you instruct variation. The variations may make lot of problems. Out of many, I have listed a couple of things. Very first things. Whenever you instruct the contractor to do any work, first thing the contractor will come and say, it's not variation, or it is variation. They will come and tell it is variation. Or client will come and tell, no, for the formalities of the contract, we ask or we instructed you to do that work through variation, but it's not really a variation to you. So the very first things, after you issue the instruction, there will be a problem to identify whether this is really a variation or not. Even though you instructed them, there will be a problem to identify whether this is going to be a variation or not. The second one, after you instructed them, they're going to identify whether this variation, yes, of course it is variation, but is it going to be a change to the scope of work? Or is it going to change my nature of my work? For an example, I work for one of the contract where we signed the contract with the contractor to do the construction only. We signed only for construction. Suddenly, the client issue an instruction to the contractor and say that, dear contractor, I have certain material, for an example, furnitures. For an example, let's take Oman. I have furnitures. Can you please use or sign a contract with any of the logistic company and bring that to us? Then after we issue that instruction, the contractor came to us and said that, ask me what you did. We are here to do construction work. Of course, you have authority to do instruct us, but those instructions should be what? Related to our scope of work. You can't ask us to go and extrude oil. You can't ask us to go and bring some kind of logistic work. We are here to do construction work. But of course, the client can negotiate with them and go for it. But there is a fact where the contractor will identify and come back to you and fight with you, telling you this is not my original scope of work. So you can issue instruction, variation, and a clause, whatever the clause is per your contract, but there will be a problem in later stage. Similar to that, the contractor will come final point. I will tell, oh, this variation, that's going to be a time and cost impact to me. You know, Mr. Engineer, you have issued something, I have a time and cost impact. You can ask him continuously, tell us how much, tell us how long, tell us how much, tell us how long. Of course, he will reply to you, it is still ongoing until you end the projects or cease the projects. So these are the fundamental problem or some of the very basic problem that we do face every day or in our life as a commercial personals in our construction problem. So variation clauses should be very clear to us to overcome these kind of problem or to make sure at early stage we're going to take enough steps to avoid these kind of disputes. So FIDIC giving us lot of information, not only one or two, but also hundreds of information, how to handle that, what are the ways that you need to handle, how to propose or request a variation, and how to settle them. Let's get into them in a deeper manner. So very first one, who can order variation? Do you think that your contractor can come and tell that engineer, that's going to be my variation, I'm doing that, pay me the money? Can they come and tell us? No, they can't come and tell us. For an example, the one of the projects which I'm working. So we receive RFI from the contractor where he said that the employer, do you know that you gave a lot of information and material at the time of tender. Unfortunately, those materials are not enough for me to execute the work. Now, I'm going to execute one work which is going to impact my time and cost. Please consider this as a variation. So he issued RFI, request for information. Through that, he mentioned some kind of information as a letter. He mentioned that, you gave something which is not enough. Now we need to do additional work, which is going to cost us time and money. So please consider this as a variation. Simple thing, I'll tell you, right? We gave borehole testing information to them. Now they are doing some kind of design and build work. They want to do borehole testing in one place. So now they are telling it's a variation. So we reply to them, dear contractor, come on. First things, you can't tell us something going to be variation. We already gave you all the document. It's your obligation to make sure that all the informations are enough for you to execute the work. You can't suddenly come out of blank and come to us and telling us, right, it's going to be a variation to us. No, forget that. So the only person FIDIC is instructing or telling or giving authority to do such a variation or ask the contractor to do additional work is contract administrator. So if you take Red or MDB, right, Redbook, it names them as a contract administrator. Or sometime other books, they do name it as an engineer. So make sure that the instructions or variations or any other things cannot or will not be raised by other people's other than contract administrator, even though you're employed. Can you employ directly instruct the contractor to do? No. Your employer cannot directly ask the contractor to do something. Why? In the condition of contract, which is expressively accepted by all the parties or two parties, main parties, where they mention, the employer will clearly mention under clause 3 or whatever it is, they mention, dear contractor, I'm going to appoint someone who I'm giving authority, to do variation. And he is the one and only person who can instruct you anything. Right now, I signed the contract, and initially we started to work. After 6 months, I visited the site, and suddenly I identified I don't like the window frame, for an example. Then I told the contractor representative, please change this window. If the contractor executed this work, is he entitled to claim the money? No. Because why? The contract administrator or including employer, they will come back and tell you, right? In the contract, we mentioned only one person can instruct you to do any changes. So even though I ask you to do something, you should have secured contractual document before you start the work. For an example, while I was working for Aramco project, we had a site visit with a very big top person of the Aramco to the site. So he visited the site, and while he visited, he asked us to change many things. So I took note all of those information, and we came back to the office. And my manager came to me and said that, ask me, let's try to speak with our construction team to do the works. I said that, sir, please wait. So we receive only verbal instruction from the client representative. Client, yeah, direct person from the client. Do we have any official document? And we all know that for Aramco, they have plenty of very nice procedures. If you don't follow them, you are not entitled to claim any single penny from them. So I told him, right, that's fine. We can do the work. They are very simple. But the problem is, if we are going to go and claim the money, there wouldn't be any money from the client, from the Aramco. Even though the person who instructed us to change will not sign the document, he will not ask us the finance to release the money. So let's try to secure the document. So very carefully, even though your employer instructed anything, you need to secure some kind of document. As a contractor, do you have obligation? Do you have an obligation to implement the changes if it is directly from the employer? No. FIDIC telling very clearly, even though it is from the client, direct client personnel, you are not obliged to do that one. You need to have a proper document. But that's not the practical in this industry. We all know that one. We all know that one. If client asks you to do, you will go and tell the engineer representative or the contract administrator, Mr. Asmi or Mr. Administrator, the client asked us to do, please issue instruction. That's not the way. So if you have received any of such a direct instruction, what you need to do is you need to raise any letter, or if your company have got or some kind of CAI, confirmation of verbal instruction, CVI, anything, then you need to use that to confirm those verbal instruction will be implemented, and any cost or time entitlement, I will secure them. So if I'm going to do all these things as an owner, as an employer or the client, how they are going to control this contract administrator? They will tell that no, even the employer say that I have authority to do that. Change the window, change the door, make it as a gold, change the bulb, everything. Or maybe, oh, stop your work, I don't want to continue that. They can do anything. So how the employer going to control that? So that's why FIDIC telling that define everything under 3 point. Yeah, employers, the engineers representative, duties and responsibilities and authorities. Under that they define, the contract administrator, you can't do whatever you want. We are going to limit you. You can do these kind of changes, no problem. Change the paint or change the small element, technical changes, no problem. But if the change is going to be some kind of 5%, 2%, or maybe time related, or maybe more than 1 million related cost, then before you go and tell the contractor, come and get my approval. Even though you're not going to tell the contractor, I got approval, do this. That will be internal matter. But before you go and tell them, you need to secure my approval. I'm the boss. Even though I gave my dedications I gave my authority to you, you need to get my approval before you instruct them. But that's approval not for everything, but for certain things. So by that way, employer is controlling contract administrator. As the one who is going to enjoy the facility, I am controlling everyone. So this is what FIDIC is simply teaching us. So first one, whenever we handle the contract, we want to know whose instruction I need to implement. If I receive instruction from other people, do I have obligations? No, I don't have. And also how the employer, or if I'm a main contractor, how I can control my sub-consultant, designers, or someone else. by having a proper particulars or some kind of clauses which is going to limit the variation instruction by contract administrator. So these are the fundamental knowledge that we are getting by learning who can order any variation to contract. So let's get into right to vary. So if you open the FIDIC book where they mention that the employer got a right as a owner, I get a right to vary any of my work. And those variations can be or may be implemented through my representative. The variation may include, listen this word guys, the variation may include, and FIDIC listed certain number from A to F. So why they did mention may? Why they did not mention each variations are or will include? Why they did not mention that and they mentions may? It means this list is not fully exhaust list. I can include any other things I want. I can include any other thing I want. This is what simply it's telling. It's very clear by using this word may include. It's telling us from A to F is not fully exhaust list. I can include anything in future as I want. So anything the employer wants can be considered as variation. So that's what simply meaning of that. So in FIDIC, they mention A to F certain item as a variations may be. Out of that, the very first one is changes to the quantities. The second one is changes to the quality of work. The third one is changes to the level, positions of any other things. And the fourth one is the omission of the work. And the fifth one is any additional work, anything, materials or something like that. And the fifth one is changes to the sequence of timing. Out of these A to F clauses, most of the time, we as a construction professional, we confuse about these three major elements such as changes to the quantities, the omission of the work, and changes to the sequence or timing of the projects. These are the fundamental or major element that we very often confuse about that. Simply, if the employer asks you to change the qualities, right, you will identify and you will go back and tell them, right, this is what you ask us to deliver the quality. Now you want us to do more quality, then that's going to be a cost. For example, while I was working for Bahrain Airport, the employer said that you need to deliver so-and-so material with an aluminium finish. Right, the contractor priced it at the time of tender. They released the document, they agree the price and everything. Then later, employer came back and said that, oh, the sample that you provided, it did not meet my expectation. Can you please increase the quality of that? Then simply the employer expecting or telling you to increase the quality of the things. So what you did, you identify the same material, same element, but you change the material to get some kind of better quality. It's very apparent. Similar to that, any level. For an example, in the drawing or issue for construction drawing or whatever the drawing that you receive at the time of tender, you receive where they mention that my wall will be 10-meter height. So you price based on that, and later the employer suddenly instructs you, telling you, can you please increase my wall to 12 meters? Then definitely, of course, you're going to come and tell the employer, the level that we have considered at the time of tender, which was 10. Now you're asking us to do 12, which is, of course, higher than our price. Now we're going to change or charge it. And the next one is additional work. For an example, as I said earlier, if you're working for a construction industry, construction contract, and the employer is asking you to additional work. For an example, I work for one of the mall projects. The project initially, we instructed the contractor to do around 710 10,000 cubic meter of excavation initial. Guys, let's take a couple of minutes for done. Right, welcome back. So as a continuation to that, so they ask you to change the level and you need to do. As an additional work, as I said, while I was working for one of the project, initially we say that contractor, as an early work contractor, you need to do 710,000 cubic meter of excavation. Then later, very straightforward, we say that we are changing the layout of the building. Because of that, you need to excavate additional of these areas. So they identified that's going to be around 510,000 cubic meter additional excavation. It's straightforward. So we asked them to do additional work, but changing the quantities, avoiding or omitting the work, or changing sequence or timing of the program. We have, or most of the time, we will be confused by the opponent. It can be a client or maybe a contractor. The other part, we will be confused in terms of whether this will be an impact in terms of variations or not. So too many of you now, you might have raised your questions now, how the change to the quantities will not be a straightforward variation, right? That's what you get here, or that kind of questions will be raised in your mind. But I'm going to bring you one attention. If you open the FIDIC, FIDIC is telling changes to the quantities of any items of work included in the contract within bracket, they mention. However, such changes do not necessarily constitute a variation. So it makes some kind of confusions, right? So they are telling under variation, they listed this, where they say that any changes to the quantity will be a variations, but within bracket, anyhow, it will not be a variation. That will be a change, but that will not be a variation. Oh, what kind of thing is that? Have you ever thought about these kind of things? Right. In the FIDIC, if you open the FIDIC, FIDIC is for what type of contract? It's a remeasurement contract. Yeah, it's a remeasurement contract. It means that FIDIC under clause 14.1c, they mention in the contract, we mention certain number of quantities. Those quantities are not dictative, but they are directive. What is the meaning of that? They are not going to be fixed number of quantities, but they are an approximate number of quantities. As we mentioned, the FIDIC is remeasurement. For that quantities, we price that 100 riyal. We can go more quantities or we can come less quantities that we mentioned within the BOQ. So it's some kind of direction. It is directing, okay, for the 1,000 cubic meter of wall or 1,000 cubic meter of concrete, the price per cubic meter is 20 riyal, for an example. My quantities can go up and down. As my contract is remeasurement contract, there wouldn't be possibly a variation to you. Of course, the quantity will go up and down, but it's not going to be a variation. Why? Because the payment I'm going to pay to you that's going to be multiplied by the quantities, your rate. So that's not going to be a variation sometime. For an example, the employer asks you to do additional work, which is completely different quantities. For an example, initially, you price in your BOQ. It's a remeasurement contract, right? So initially, you price that for 100, let's say 100 doors. And you consider, okay, I need 100 doors. I need transportation. I need 2 people to handle that. I need logistic involvement. And you consider all the prices and you divide your rates and you place the 200 doors. Each door going to be 1,000 riyal. You just made it. Then later, the employee change the quantities. It's a remeasurement contract. Change of quantities may or may not. Right now, they change the quantity from 100 to 2 doors. They say that close the building, seal the building, deliver me only 2 doors. Do you think that this quantity change will make you possible variations? Or still the employer going to pay you 1,000 riyal multiplied by 2,000 riyal? There will be a problem. So this time, as they made a change dramatically, you're going to go back and argue with the employer, dear employer, that rate is not applicable now. Why? At the time of pricing, I consider I need to deliver 100 doors. For the delivery of 100 doors, I need to pay 30,000 to my trucks. I need to pay 20,000 for the handlers. I need to pay 1,000 or 10,000 for the storage. Now you reduce that from 100 to 2, where the 2 doors still need transportation of 30,000. Still need 2 person to handle that, which is going to cost me 20,000. Still they need storing facilities, which is going to cost us now less 5,000. If you are going to pay me 2,000 riyal, from where I'm going to get all this money? So now the quantity change going to impact your rate, and there will be a variation to you. And the rate, you're going to go and argue with them. My rate is not applicable because of that changes. Still, I need to pay these kind of additionals, indirect costs, and I need to recover that. If you are going to pay me for 2 doors, 2,000 riyal based on my rate, I will lost around 50,000. So that's why FIDIC mentioned possibly there will be a changes, may or may not. So if the rate is going to be, if the quantity is going to be changed dramatically, for example, from 1,000 doors to 5,000 doors, then still your rate will be reduced, but the employer will pay the same amount, same rate. Sometimes the employer can come and argue with you. Contractor, you price this rate for 1,000 riyals considering 100 doors. Now I'm asking you to deliver 5,000 doors. Surely you need to give some kind of deduction, some kind of different rate. Now the employer will come back to you and discuss with you, and you will adjust the rate if required. So that's why changes in quantities of any item of the work will not make you variation. That's why FIDIC mentioned, right? All of your variations will not make impact to your contract price or the rate, and they will not be considered as a variation, because fundamentally your contract is remeasurement, and adjustment to the quantities will not severely impact your price because you will be paid multiplied by rate. That's it, right? So that's the very first element. And the second element about omission of work, FIDIC very clearly mentioned, right? Very clearly mentioned. You can omit the work. For an example, you started the work, suddenly you identify that construction of certain portion of the work is not necessarily required for you for future usage. Or maybe you identify, right, you got money problem. For your convenience, you are going to omit certain portion. That's fine. FIDIC is telling that. Of course, employer, it's your projects. If you're telling that, okay, you can omit the work, no problem. And that of omissions will not be impacted any cost or something to the contractor. You can omit that, no problem. And also FIDIC is giving a chance for the employer under 15.1, if I'm not wrong, for the employer to suspend, terminate the work for his convenience. What is the meaning of for his convenience? The employer started the work, suddenly he identified he cannot bring the money or he got no money. Then FIDIC is telling that, okay, it's your projects, stop the work, terminate the work for your convenience, pay all the money, all the costs that I incurred, I'm happy with that. So both parties agreed for that. So omission of work, similar to that, the FIDIC is telling that the employee can omit the work, no problem, but under one condition. You should not omit the work from me and give that to someone else. For an example, at early stage, you identify my price as a very competitive price. And you sign the contract, I started to work on that. But unfortunately, after a couple of months, one of the contractor came to you and said that, oh, Mr. Employer, why did you give all the work? He is claiming you 12 million. I can give that. I can complete the work of 6 million. Now you got some kind of idea. Oh my God, I'm going to serve 6 million. Right. Omission of work. Dear contractor, please omit so and so work. And after a couple of months, after a couple of days, you as a contractor notice, right? Another contractor came to do the work. Same work. And you investigated and you got to know that the omission they made not for anything, any of my problem, but only for money. FIDIC very clearly say that. You can omit the work, but you can't do that one. Why? You, in your entirety, you did all the due diligence and you identify one contractor as a person who is well established to do the work. Now you awarded and you omitted one person to give that to someone else. It's not fair. Why? The contractor might have allocated majority of his profit or maybe serving for that work. You can't omit that work where he's going to lose all his profit sometime and he's going to put money for other work to be completed, and you are giving this work to someone else. Well, you are getting profit and he's getting profit where the original contractor is losing money. So one very famous case between Main Road and Reed and Stewart Private Limited in Australia High Court, where they say that if you sign a contract by identifying one of the contractor as a well-established good person to do everything by considering time, cost, quality, you award it. Then later, you should not omit the work for the purpose of to award that to or give that to someone else. If the contractor identify that as a situation, then they will come and make a case against you, and in all the situation, they will win. Even in Sharia law, they are telling that you should not do these kind of breaches. The contract means it's an agreement with an intention, good intention to execute the work. If you are going to do such a things which is against the agreement, then you will be impacted. So omission of work, very careful guys. If your employer is asking you to omit the work, I'm going to give that to someone else. Your obligation as a consultant, as a contractor, or as a whoever representative, your obligation to notify the party, telling them, the employer, the client, or whoever it is, or the engineer, you're omitting for the reason which is not breached by us. We did not default. We did not make any mistake. You're omitting this work to give someone else, which is against the law, against a contract and everything. And we will surely will consider this as a claim or as a dispute, right? So it's very important for us to take decision. If your employer is telling you don't just issue the instruction, advise your client, telling them, dear client, you're asking me to remove so and so work, omit so and so work to give that to ABC companies, but the contract is very clearly telling we can't omit the work to give that to someone else. If we are going to do that, no problem. It's not my money. They will definitely raise that as a claim, right? So this is what you need to tell to them. And similar to that, changes to sequence and timing of the execution of the work, right? So FIDIC giving chance for the employer, as he is the owner, considering any benefit, he can change the sequence or timing of the work. For an example, the employer is the one who is going to take their design responsibilities. Now, they completed the design, they gave the document to you, you have started to do the work, and suddenly the employer identify, oh, if I'm going to do these kind of changes, that's going to be a beneficial to me. Or maybe he identifies some kind of design changes, and he did the design changes and informed the contractor, dear contractor, I'm doing some kind of design changes on this part. Please hold that portion and start to do the work or sequence to that work and hold all that suspension. For an example, while I was working for Bahrain Airport, the employer instructed us to suspend certain area where they say that we are redesigning it and skip that sequence of the work and start other work. Submit your revised program within so and so time, within so and so period, 7 days or 14 days. So why the employer got a chance? As we know that one FIDIC Redbook is for construction contract. So the employer is the one who is designing it. So considering these kind of design changes, the employer should have a provision to tell the contractor, dear contractor, change the sequence so I can complete my design and come back to you, right? But once the employer approves the sequence, your programs, timings, and everything, after 6 months, the employer identified, oh, if I change this sequence, the contractor can complete the work early. Can they do these kind of sneaky work and ask the contractor to accelerate the contract? Definitely they cannot. If the employer gonna use or ask you to do these kind of things, then you need to pick why the employer is asking me to do this sequence changing or timing changing. Is that for the purpose of accelerating my work? No. I'm going to tell back, I'm going to speak back to the client or the client representative and tell them, dear client, this is my program, which was approved by you, and I made, considering my convenience, I designed this program, but you approved that. Of course, now the program is belong to the project. If you want to change, of course, all the consequences in terms of time and cost, you need to take care. If it is going to impact accelerating, for an example, he's telling, oh, bring the work so you can complete it earlier. I'm going to tell, no, employer, I put the work there because only on that month, I will receive resources to execute the work. Of course, I know that one, I can start the work January rather than June. But the problem is the machineries or the material will arrive to my site June, not January. So I prepare based on my program, leads, my resources and everything. You can't come and tell me after you approve that, do this one so you will accelerate. No, you can't tell them. Sorry for that. If you receive such an instruction, you have full authority to write back to them and tell them, the employer, sorry, I can't do that one. It's my program, approve that. If you want me to do that one, no problem. I need to bring resources other places. I will not get so-and-so element like January where I already planned June. I need to bring from outside. You need to pay that money as well as the money I already paid to their previous contractor as a reservation or lead material or something like that. I'm going to claim it. So please make sure that using that provision, the employer cannot issue it as a variation, right? And also, how about method change? Under FIDIC, they did not specifically, under 13.1, they did not specifically mention changing method will have impact in terms of your variation. Did they mention it? No. But changing method is the contractor's responsibilities. We all know that one, as we are working in the construction industries. It's very, 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 very rare. I would say that 0.001% that we do ask the contractor to submit method statement of all the work. Maybe we may ask 1 or 2 method statements for special or very important work, or maybe method statement, how you are going to complete as a sequence of your work. But we don't ask all the method statement for plastering, for block work, for concreting, for your curing. We don't ask all the method statement at the time of bidding. Why? It depends on the contractor's work. So time to time, or as his expertism, he will decide how I'm going to do. But whenever it comes to temporary work, do you remember we learned there where RS FIDIC defined it, we mentioned variation mean any changes to the capital work, W capital work. Then FIDIC defined work mean capital W works mean any permanent or temporary work. So it means that changes to the temporary work also will be or may be considered as a variation. So if the employer asks you to do some kind of changes to your temporary work of your construction method, then you as a contractor possibly raise that as a variation, and you have an entitlement to claim any changes to those things. So you should be a very proper, well knowledgeable person to pick that and claim the money. And don't think that all the situation you are entitled for money. Any changes, anything changes, you are entitled. For an example, while I was working for one of the mall project, we signed a contract with a contractor. Then in our contract, FIDIC, they mentioned in any situation, if the contractor identifies changes to the cost or time, they need to raise notice to the contract administrator. They mentioned very clearly. They mentioned any situation. Then I issued engineer's instruction and contract administrator instruction, both are same. Contract administrator's instruction to the contractor. Then I waited for them to submit their notice, interim claims or final claims to see the time and cost impact. After the time passed, I called the contractor's representative and I asked him, hey, why you did not submit your notice? And he said that, what notice? I said that we issued engineer CAI instruction, contract administrator's instruction. We want to know whether it is cost or time impact or not. Then suddenly he said that, no, Mr. Contract Administrator, if you issued contract administrator instruction, it default, we have a time and cost impact. I said, Abdullah, come on. I don't know whether this instruction is going to be a money or time impact to you or not. You as a contractor might have considered these things within your BOQ and might have considered within your time frame. So now if it is additional time and cost impact, you need to notify to me and you need to prove me that you did not consider these two elements, time and cost, within your original program. Then only I will be convinced. So in any situation, the FIDIC is very clear under 21.1, where they are telling that in any situation, under this condition of contract, in any situation, any under clauses you identify, you have a time and cost impact, you need to issue a notice notifying the client within 14 days or 28 days or whatever it is. So please make sure that in any situation, anything going to be changed in terms of your work, you need to be very careful in terms of claims you are entitled. Yeah, we're very careful about working with those kind of things. Right now we learn those three very important elements. Let's go into the ground of objection. So I receive instruction from the client. I receive the instruction from the clients. So what is my obligations as a contractor? The very first one is I need to reply back to them. I need to reply back to them, telling them, the employer, I receive your variations instruction, which is going to cost me as well as that's going to impact my completion program. About the detailed information, I'll come back to you. But I receive an instruction which in fact I cannot execute that. I feel like, for an example, I'm working in a pandemic situation. Well, no laborers, no people in that place and many other things. Now the employer asked me to increase the productivity. He's telling that, oh, dear contractor, you know that you are bringing only 100 people, so I need 500 people, increase your productivity. Then I'm going to reply. Or maybe he's asking you, dear contractor, bring so-and-so material from Italy. I'm going to reply back to them. Dear employer, you instructed me to bring additional resources, additional material from Italy. But unfortunately, I'm objecting that instruction because of the market condition. I can't bring that material. Or maybe I'm going to tell him, these variations, that's going to change my fundamental scope of work. For an example, as I said earlier, the contract was signed between the parties to do the construction work. If the client wants the contractor to do some kind of logistic arrangement, where the client came and say that, no, I need to bring the furniture from Oman. Can you please bring that? It is changing the nature of the work. Or maybe the instruction you receive as an experienced contractor you identified, that's going to make a critical problem to your building. That's going to make a critical problem to your building. Or maybe that's going to be a safety issues, or that will severely impact your performance. Now you have an obligation to write back to the client and tell the client, dear client, you asked me to do something. I obliged to do all your instruction except so and so thing. Because of this instruction is not possibly implemented, or not possibly will bring a safe situation, or not give us a chance to complete our work in an expected performance, we are rejecting or objecting your instruction. Once I objected that, the client or the client representative, they need to come back to you and tell that, yes, I agree the reason that you mentioned, and now I'm canceling that variation. Or maybe he's going to tell, no, I still want that variation. Or maybe he can tell, okay, give me that. I'm going to slightly modify that. I'm going to slightly change the design. Now that will be good for you. Right now, the engineer obliged under FIDIC 1999 to cancel his instruction, or again confirm the instruction, or revise and reissue that to you. Let's take a situation. The engineer issued variation to you, and you objected that. Then the engineer again varied that and issued that to you. And again you objected that. Then the engineer again confirmed it. You objected, the engineer confirmed it. So what will be the situation now? Even though you notify that the engineer, this instruction going to be a threat to our building, there wouldn't be any safe situation. People cannot sit inside the building. You raise your objection, but still the engineer insisting or confirming for you to do that. So what kind of situation is going to end up? That's going to be a dispute. Dispute means clear disagreement. As a contractor, I'm telling I can't execute that. There will be a so-and-so problem based on the contract. But as an engineer, you're insisting me to do that one. From an experienced person or an experienced perspective, I can't do this one. I'm clearly disagreeing with your instruction. So what will happen in accordance with the FIDIC? That will move from this place to the dispute adjudication board. So there are certain situations only for the contractor to object any instruction from the client or the engineer. Other than all other situations, you have to implement that. Okay, so these are the express situation where as a contractor where you can raise your voice telling them, guys, we can't do that one. So that's going to be a threat to our execution. And the next one is limit to the scope of variation. So for an example, while I was working for Riyadh Metro, We sign a contract with one of the facility management contractor. For an example, I'll tell you, right? We raise a concern, we sign a contract for the value of 100 million. And we started to instruct them a lot of changes. At one point, they wrote back to us and say that, hold on, Mr. Engineer, Mr. Employer, you keep instructing us. Do you know what is the limitation of maximum work amount that you can change? If you are going to change more than so and so percentage of my total contract, I need to bring additional supports. I need to bring additional officers. I need to bring additional requirement. I can't accommodate all your changes. So simply, in most of the contract, we do mention if it is a variation, what is the maximum limitation of variation that we can instruct you. For an example, a very good example, guys, you all need to know about this one. We do assess the people at the time of RICS assessment. So in one of the assessment, a person attended the interview and he said that his original contract is 55 million. And a variation, he instructed the contractor to do a variation of 33 million, which is 60% or more than 60% of the original contract. Come on, so 55 million and 33 million. It's around 60, more than 60% of original contract. Come on. So we asked the candidate, dear candidate, you advise your employer to do this work or to instruct this work, 33 million worth of work as an engineer's instruction to the contractor. That's fine, no problem of it. But based on your contract, what is the maximum limit of variation that you can issue to the contract? Because if it is going to be more than that, the contractor definitely will come and tell you, hold down, Mr. Employer, the rates that I mentioned, considering maximum of 10% additional work. If you are going to ask me to do additional more than 10%, I need additional peoples. I need additional spaces. I need additional monitors, laptop, electricity. That's going to change my rate. Now I'm going to change the rate. So we asked them, what is the percentage, maximum percentage of variation that you can issue under the contract? Then he said that simply, I don't know. The referral report the chairman wrote to the candidate where we mentioned, dear candidate, you asked the employer to issue 33 million worth of work as an instruction to the contractor to do as an additional work. But unfortunately, you are not aware the limitation of additional work that you can instruct. So fundamentally, if the amount is more than 10%, if the work is more than 10% of your total work, where in your contract it mentioned the variation can go up to 10%. If it is more than that, the contractor is entitled to change his rate, change his profit, change his overhead. So if it is more than that, you need to go back and tell the client, dear client, you are changing my works. Your variations are more than 10%. I'm going to change my rate because I need so-and-so problem. I need so-and-so problem. So limitation of the scope of variation is very limited as per your contract. So make sure that your contract limitation of additional works, variations are set. If not, what you will do? You will make an amendment or you will suggest at least that it's a good practice to include limitation to the variation, right? That's what we call limits to the scope of variation. The next one is limit to the time for instruction variation. The FIDIC very clearly say that the employer can, or the employer's representative can instruct variation at any time prior to the taking over certificate. Most of the time, my students, they do ask question whenever we learn about contract practice and contract administration, they do ask question, sir, after we receive TOC, we're going to do some kind of patchwork. By that time, the employer is going to issue us variation by the name of variation. Can we execute and can we consider that as a variation? If your contract very clearly saying about these kind of clause, Like at any time they can instruct, but that should be prior to the TOC. Of course, definitely you can reject them and you are not obliged to even reply to them. Because why? TOC means simply you have practically completed your work and the employer already occupied the work. Now your retention 50% was released to you. Any insurance handed over back to you. So you have no major obligation in terms of doing work. And also your contract is very clearly telling that the employer, you can instruct anytime, but that should be prior to the TOC. So if you receive variation after the period of TOC, you are simply not obliged to reply to the mail. You can tell them, no, that's not variation to me, because my contract says that variation can only occur before TOC. Now I'm out of that period and this is not even a single piece of paper to me, right? That's why you're going to do that. So as a contractor, you have full obligation authorities to tell them, I completed TOC, I good, now I'm the LPO, whatever the things that I'm doing, I'm not obliged to do anything. But most of the time, the clients, they do ask you to come and do the works, additional work, new works and everything. Why? By threatening your retention money. By forecasting that retention money, the contractor will come and do that. But you, as a strong contractual personnel, you should be very careful in terms of telling or writing back to them, I'm not obliged to do that one. If you don't release my retention, there will be a consequence and you will come and meet me on the court, right? So you have all the obligation to reject it. So you need to be very careful. What is the time limit? When or on or before when they can instruct us to do anything. That's what it's going to tell. And the next one is, we learn about 13.1. Similar to that, 13.2, which is telling us some kind of other works. So where the employer can instruct, only the authorized person to instruct us, the employer or the employer representative based on the contract. But can the instructor, can the contractor do some kind of these kind of instruction? No, but he can generate instruction from the client. How? By giving some kind of idea. For an example, the client got no clear idea about some kind of variation. Before he come and instruct you, he wants to know how much this work gonna cost. So if you think this work is a potential work where I'm going to get a lot of profit from that, when the employer come and ask you to give a proposal, then you're going to work out that, identify that, and you're going to give your ideas, telling the client, dear client, if you are going to do so and so things as an additional work, this is the cost, and I'm giving my technical advice. Doing this will be a beneficial to the project. Do that. So the client not only by directly instruct you to do something, but also ask your opinion, your idea by ask you to provide your proposal. So whenever the client asks you to give a proposal through verbal, you need to be very careful, guys. Or maybe the client is sending a letter giving you or asking you to provide a proposal, but they did not mention the word called request. They did not mention the word called request. They did not mention request for proposal. Dear contractor, can you please provide your proposal? They just mention it. They just mention it. As a clever commercial person, you need to be very careful to write back to the client and say that, dear client, can you please make sure that this is request for proposal, not for proposal? Because why? If the client did not mention request within that paper, later they will come and tell that, no, I did not ask you to submit so and so thing. I asked you to do the work, but you failed to do that. Sometimes, they do issue the letter. They will not specifically mention proposal. They will tell that the employer is willing to do so and so work. The contractor obliged to take action. The action can be submit the proposal. The action can be execute the work. The action can be suggest something to you. We don't know that. So as a client, they need to mention within the paper very clearly request for proposal. Request for proposal. It means that simply they need to come and ask you what I want. Can you please give this to me? Then you are going to give your proposal. So very clear, guys. Whenever you receive request for proposal or some kind of letter where you are confused about that, make sure that the client is asking some kind of request from you. Ensure it is request for proposal. Otherwise, you will end up in a problem. The client will simply come and tell, or the client representative, they will come and tell, no, I didn't ask you request. Where did I mention request? Where did I mention proposal? I just asked you to do that. Who knows that? Right? Okay, so make sure that they are mentioning request within the proposal requirement. Whenever the client asks you to do some kind of proposal, FIDIC is telling under 13.3, what are the things that you need to include within your proposal? Of course, the client wants to see what kind of impact in terms of my time, cost, quality, as well as any other impacts going to happen. If I'm going to do these changes, what are the things going to happen? I want to see, I want to foresee, I want to predict how much it's going to be, then I'm going to take a decision. If it is direct instruction mean, I'm going to tell them, I know the cost and everything, I don't care about that, do the work. But if I'm asking you to give a proposal, it means that I need to check, I need to make sure I have money to do this work, I have enough resources to handle the work that is required for me, then that is achievable for me, then I'm going to ask you to do the work. So whenever the contractor's proposal submitted to the client, you need to be very careful about describe how this work gonna be. For example, recently I requested the contractor to provide design and build of retaining wall to protect so and so place. I just sent a letter under 13.3, ask them, please submit your request for proposal to do design and construction of retaining wall of so and so place. And I mentioned follow FIDIC clause 13.3, which means they need to check what 13.3 is telling. 13.3 is telling whenever you submit your proposal, you need to describe how this work gonna be. And in terms of money, what are the impact will be. In terms of time, how long it's going to impact my program or your completion of that program. And also, finally, what are the necessary other modification I need to take. So whenever you as a contractor submit any proposal, you need to take care of this. Whenever as a client, whenever you receive proposal from the contractor, you need to be very careful in terms of checking this, whether the contractor very clearly distinguish all this information and mention all those information as a crystal clear for you to take a decision. So very careful in terms of oblige, in terms of submitting 13.3 proposal to the contractor. For example, sometimes you requested the proposal, request for proposal a work, but the contractor did not submit proposal. What are the reasons maybe? One, the request for proposal, it may not his scope of work. For example, you ask them to do, for example, you sign a contractor to do a construction, but you ask him to bring or procure a helicopter. Do you think that the contractor is going to submit a proposal? He will tell this engineer representative must be, some kind of so and so person. So they will throw this paper out and they will say, I'm not going to respond to this, wasting my time. And he knows that my contract is construction contract. And also this requirement is completely different. It's not my nature scope of work. Of course, the FIDIC 13.1, which is telling may include certain list of people's element from A to F, which is related to my scope of work, nature of my scope of work, but not completely out of my nature of work. So one, they are not going to submit their proposal because of so and so things. Or if the constructor did not consider that this requirement is not under 13.1, simply which is not my scope of work. So the contractor did not submit the proposal. It means that they are not breaching the contract. It means that there are reasons for not being submit the proposal. One, not possibilities. Second, out of scope of work. Third, that's not their nature of scope. So you need to be very careful not to take or don't take actions against the contractor, or as a contractor, don't avoid all these kind of requests for proposal, because that's not good practice and that's not the best industrial practice. So if you receive any proposal, try to submit that to the client if possible, right? And also preparing proposal. So most of the contract, if you open FIDIC, Redbook, or MDB or something like that, they did not specifically and very clearly mention who is going to take care if I'm going to cost, if I'm going to lose money for big amount of money. For the cost proposal or preparing the proposal, who is going to take care of the money? Especially you ask, as a client, ask me to do or submit some kind of proposal. In order to submit the proposal, I'm supposed to prepare detailed design, which is going to cost me a lot of amount of money. But in the FIDIC, not very clearly mentioned how the big cost of preparing proposals will be shared. They mention under 13.2, the contractor will prepare the proposal from his own pocket. But if the proposal amount going to be very high amount of money, from where I'm going to claim? I did the proposal for the contract that we already signed. Am I entitled for that? If I'm going to do detailed design, how I can claim that? For an example, I work for one of the mall projects. We got one of the provisional sum within the contract. So before we instruct officially that provisional sum, we asked the contractor to start, earlier, advance. We gave the advance copy unofficially, and we told them, can you please start your detailed design? They started to prepare the detailed design, but later, as it is provisional sum, the client decided not to go further, cancel that provisional sum. We informed them, we issued them an instruction, inform them, we are canceling this provisional sum. But the contractor came back to us and said that, oh, administrator, do you remember you gave all these documents as an advance copy through an email, and we already asked our designers to start to design the work. We spent 70,000 real. Can you please pay us? What we did, we replied to them, dear contractor, first things, you started the work without instruction. Even though we ask you to do with advance copy, you should have secured proper engineer instruction. The third one, under the clause 13.3, we very clearly mention, in any situation, any preparation of proposal will be your risk. So we rejected that. So as a clever contractor, even though the client with in a friendly manner asks you to do that one, you should request them to submit proper approval. Most of the time, whenever the employer asks the contractor to submit the proposal, they do mention certain days. Okay, submit your proposal within 15 days. Even though in the contract did not mention that very clearly, but we do ask some time frame. Similar to that, when the contractor submit their proposal to us, they do mention the offer of this proposal is valid for 21 days. Why they do mention that? Why do they mention that? Because by the request of your proposal, I got to know there will be changes to certain work. If we are going to delay the approval of that request for proposal for 6 months, and I need to suspend my work, which is relevant to that instruction or proposal for 6 months, where The employer will come and ask you after 6 months, I'm canceling my proposal, you continue the work. But you're going to come and tell the employer, what you are playing with me? You say you asked the proposal, I submitted the proposal, and I thought that that proposal will impact my so-and-so work. So I stopped that for 6 months. Now you are canceling that proposal. It means that I need to start the work that's going to delay my project for 6 months. So that's why whenever you respond to the client, you need to be very careful to mention that my proposal is valid for 21 days. If you are not going to respond to that, I'm not going to take any mitigation actions to any delay to my project, and I'm not going to incur any cost. You need to respond to that. That's why, as a contractor, whenever you respond to them, you need to be very careful in terms of mentioning a period of within how many days you need to reply to me. Otherwise, I'm not going to execute or wait for you. Otherwise, I will be in default. Similar to that, we all know that one valuation of variations. Once you did all this work, then finally your valuation will be executed. Most of the time, the client, they do change this clause where they do mention how the valuation will be take place. Most of the time, the valuation will be used your agreed rates, or that rates, if it is a new, then that will be accepted. Or some situation where your rate is not suitable. As I said earlier, 1,000 door, from 1,000 door to 2 doors, where your rates is not applicable. So throughout those situations, you're going to sit down with them and you're going to agree how to vary, how to agree the cost, how they agree the rates, and agree the final account. So these are the things that you are going to do. As a last things, valuation. We all know that one. Value engineering is, sorry, not valuation, value engineering. Value engineering is a systematic approach to maintain or to deliver the required quality with a less cost. For an example, you have an AC, or let's take a bulb. You have a bulb where that bulb gonna cost you 1,000 riyal, while the bulb will provide you 400 lux level, which is the brightness of that area. The contractor identified the employer, rather than paying 1,000 riyal to get 4,400 lux level, why we can't bring this light, another light, which is still going to provide 400 lux level, but the price is only 100 riyal, from 1,000 to 100. I'm reducing the cost, but still maintaining the qualities, 400 lux level. So that's what we call value engineering. So FIDIC under 13.2, which is giving a chance for the contractor to raise his proposal by giving them the employer. I have identified certain situation where if I'm going to do, or if you are going to accept my proposal, this proposal will accelerate the construction. This proposal will give you long-term serving. This proposal will reduce your construction cost. This proposal will give you benefit in terms of society or social. For an example, while I was working for Bahrain Airport, the original contract they signed to deliver the concrete columns for the building. But after they signed the contract, their contractor identified, rather than installing concrete column, if we can increase or install steel column, that's going to reduce the cost, that's going to reduce the maintenance, that's going to increase the durability, that's going to increase the program acceleration. So they made some kind of suggestion, and under that clause, particular clause, they made their suggestion to the client, and they said that the client, these are the benefits that we have identified. If you agree, right, we are happy and we can execute the work. And one thing, are the contractors going to raise all these kind of benefit to the employer without single penny of benefit to him? Definitely no. What he's going to do? Of course, the contractor will make these kind of beneficial proposal only when he is going to receive some kind of benefit from such a proposal. Otherwise, if he is not going to receive any beneficial, then what he is going to do? He's going to execute the work as the employer said, because if I'm not going to get any benefit, why do I need to put additional people to do this research? Why do I need to put additional people to do all this engineering work? Why I need to put additional people to do all this work? I'm not going to do this work if I'm not going to get benefit. So whenever value engineering being executed for any of the projects, you need to be very careful. Right, out of many amount of serving, many things you're going to serve, you are going to take or share some of the benefit from that. If not, you are not going to be a person who's going to serve money to your employer, but you're going to lose money, or you're going to give the money away. Because you need to put additional people to do this additional value engineering suggestions, all this work without getting single penny from them. But at the end, the employer going to get benefit, reducing the cost, reducing the design, reducing the maintainability, reducing the maintenance cost, many things. For example, while I was working for Taif Airport, we identified one of the staircase they installed that's going to be glass. Then we identify throughout the long-term period, if anything happened and the nature of the usage of the staircase will cost the employer in terms of maintain because of damage to the glass. So we suggested, why don't we go for stainless steel? We suggested very good suggestion, and we suggested cables. Let's install the cables, which will be a professional and that will save money. Then they said that yes, go ahead. Then we said that yes, that's fine, we can go ahead, but there will be a huge amount of saving. Share us 25% of the serving and take 75% of the serving to you. The employer liked the deal and they said, yes, go ahead. This is the variation instruction, go ahead. So we did that. So whenever you do such a proposal under value engineering, you need to be very careful. You are the one who is initiating, and you should receive some kind of benefit. And also the final one, FIDIC is telling, if you are submitting some kind of value engineering, you need to do a design responsibility. That design responsibility not only gonna stop in terms of just completing the design, but also take care any failure in future of your design. So before you raise any value engineering, make sure that you are going to protect yourself. It means that your company is from so and so problem too. Okay, so this is what we call value engineering. So with that, I have listed under 13 what are the clauses linking any personnel or any of the contract under FIDIC as a entitlement to variation. So these are the clauses which is linking under clause 13 and how the contractor is entitled for any variation. Okay, right. With that all, thank you so much. If I'm not wrong, I think I have completed the lectures within the time. Sorry for that. Okay, 2 minutes more. So if you have questions, you can raise your hands up. So we are not going to extend the questions answer session more than 15 minutes. So first 4 peoples or 5 peoples will be limited for question. So those peoples will be provided to a question chance. So the very first one, Ashik. Okay, Ashik, let me give you a chance to open love your mic. You can unmute and speak now. You can unmute. Right corner of your Teams, you can see unmute mic. Click that. Unmute and speak. Or else you can type your questions in chat. Ashik, you able to speak? Ashik Jizan. Right, okay. The other one, Abdul Wadud. Yes, I'm allowing you to speak. So if you want, you can switch on your mic and speak, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay,
My question is related to value engineering.
okay.
I am on a project where the contract states that value engineering, the contractor shall propose value engineering of work amounting XYZ amount. If the contractor does not propose any value engineering work, so value engineering items, so will the contractor be called for not obliging with the contract?
I'm not clear about your question. So what you are telling that in your contract, they mention the contractor can raise the value engineering for an amount of so and so?
No, they mention the contractor shall propose of value engineering work amounting XYZ amount. So they wanted contractor to propose value engineering of works that save employer some amount, but the contractor did not propose any amount. So will this be not obliging with the contract?
No, Abdul Wadud, to be very frank, value engineering is not an obligatory one. It's not compulsory for the contractor to raise it. It's, some kind of beneficial one. If the contractor identify in any situation, it's not a limited amount of money, but for any amount of money, you have identified a situation where that's going to be beneficial to the client. And also you're going to raise or get some money, then you can raise it. I'm so surprised to hear such a wording. The contractor can raise variations of value engineering for an amount of, for an example, 1 million. It means that, if I'm not wrong, I need to see the contract. It means that the employer tries to tell you that maximum amount of value engineering you can raise for 1 million. For example, out of 50-50 serving, maybe you can go up to the maximum 50%. Your maximum 50% serving will be 1 million. For example, first value engineering you submitted 10,000 real serving 5,000. The second one 100,000, 50,000. So now 55,000, something like that. That can go up to 1 million. If you are going to suggest value engineering after that, then you are not entitled for that. Maybe the reason of that, but I'm not aware why such a clause mentioned within that contract.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. It's not an obligation.
It's not obligatory. Value engineering is not obligatory to any of the contractors.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. And the next one is Musharraf. Right, Musharraf, I think he left. Nagarajan, please. You can switch on your mic and speak now.
Good evening.
Very good evening.
Yeah, it's a very good lecture.
Oh, thank you so much.
Mostly what happens when FIDIC Redbook is without changing the variation clause, they make it as a lump sum contract.
Yeah.
So in that case, how these variations or the instructions will be interpreted when it is a lump sum, and even including design and build also. Sometimes they don't use the yellow book, they use the red book itself with the same conditions and everything FIDIC, maybe copy paste or whatever it is. And it makes a lot of complication to interpret the instruction and the variations. For example, now under 3.3, you can instruct.
Yeah.
Under 12.1, you request for proposal.
Yes.
As a client, right?
Yes.
But the problem is, if it is a design and build, then I have no obligation under the contract to issue any request for proposal under 12.1 because it is a design and build. So I can instruct to do whatever it is want to complete the performance of the project.
Yes.
Well, that is what my, yeah.
You're right. So Nagaraj, very nice questions. The fundamental principle why FIDIC introduced different types of book for the purpose of different usage. So if your employer wants to use a single book, for an example, Redbook for design and build, Redbook for lump sum, Redbook for something else, then he, as an employer, should have changed all the relevant clauses as matching for the scope of work that he's changing. If he did not change it, as an experienced contractor, at the time of tendering, you should have picked all those things and you should have considered them as a risk. Those are going to be a risk to you, right?
Correct, correct.
You need to pick them as a risk and you should include enough money within your contract, POK amount. If the employer is not aware, of course, in future, that's going to be a lot of problem to you. Or else you can suggest them. You have a chance still. You are in a tender period. You can tell them, the employer, we have identified a lot of complications within the contract. Why don't you go for a green book? Why don't you go for a yellow book? For an example, if you take FIDIC green book, which is telling that you only need to use FIDIC green book if your contract is less than $500,000 and your contract period is less than 6 months, only you need to use. But the employer, they do change it, they do use it for 5 years. As they want, they do change, they use it. But the sole purpose of releasing certain books for certain purpose by FIDIC to make sure that this book will have certain risk, certain arrangement, certain procedure. So your client, or if you are a client, you should make sure that we are using so and so things for so and so purposes. Otherwise, that's going to be a lot of risk, lot of management, miscommunication, lot of problem.
Okay,
Yeah,
will it if the sorry for asking another continuous
no problem.
question. If the contractor refuse to or object to take the instruction because it is not very clear, then will it goes to the dispute because the conditions were prepared by the client? How the dispute panel will look into this case?
Now, the dispute panel, I don't want to do many other informations, right? The dispute panel, if it is going to go to the dispute panel, the dispute panel will check whether this clause is very clear to the parties or not. For an example, one clause is telling some kind of information where that clause was interpreted by the client in a different manner and you interpret it in a different manner, then that's going to end up in a close call or situation called contra preferendum rule. It means that the person who drafted this contract, he made this kind of mesh, this kind of problem, unclear information. Because of that, the person who drafted the contract will get least benefit by the dispute resolution board. The board will think, yes, the contractor identified this as a problem. There is an ambiguity. You, Mr. Client, who drafted this contract should have drafted in a proper manner. But you made some kind of mistake. Because of that, we're going to consider most benefit to the contractor and least benefit to you. So you don't want to go into that. You raise this matter to the dispute board. They will look after that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, no problem. And the next one, that's going to be Vetri. Yes, please. You can switch on your mic, your right hand top. You have a mic. You can disable that or unmute, speak that. Enable that, unmute and speak. Right. If you can't, the next one is Malik.
Hi there. Thank you for this, good session.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. You have mentioned, like the 10% limit for varying the works.
Yep.
In which clause this is mentioned there in the standard condition?
If you open 13.1, where they mentioned that how the construction instructions can go and what is the maximum limit of variation can happen. But most of the time, the client maintained that 10%. Open 13, close 13, read that, you will get to know where they mention. They mention the maximum limitation of the variations will be 10% of the total contract amount. So most of the time they do limit that one. But if the client is very, very clever, they will remove that 10% and they will just mention any point we can instruct you for any amount. It means that throughout the contract period, you will go for 10%, 20%, 30%, or 100% without changes to your rates, right? So go and open 13 point. So you will get to know the clause. If I'm not wrong.
13.1, right?
Yes, 13.1. Open that, you will get to know that.
Yeah, it states, like variation may be initiated by the engineer at any time, but there is no mention of 10% here,
Are
maximum
you looking
limit.
in that FIDIC Redbook or from
Yes.
Abu Dhabi or something like that?
No, FIDIC Redbook 1999.
Okay, maybe.
Subclause 13.1.
Look the other clauses. I'm not aware which specific clause 13.1, but under 13 variations. Look into that. 12.3 evaluations. Yeah, Nabrin, he mentioned 12.3. So look into that. 12.3 is that mentioned?
I am from Oman. Our standard condition for building and civil engineering works, we do have this 10% in
Okay.
our old standard condition.
Okay, how about
19.
FIDIC? Open the 12.3 and see that. You have that in front of you.
Yes, 13.3.
12.3.
12.3.
Yeah. Right, in Qatar, 20%. So similar to that. And also very careful, guys. Sometime, for an example, Abu Dhabi, they have a standard form of contract, which is exactly same as FIDIC with a very minor changes. Sometime people, they do think that is the standard FIDIC. Check whether it is your country's standard form of contract or international standard form of contract. Right? I think Maliki
But
got
this
that,
is,
right?
yeah, this is related to, the change in the quantity. But if you have, like new items there.
New item of what?
Of works.
Of the works, okay.
Yeah, and you don't have rates of that in the, in the
Yeah.
contract.
Yes.
So you need to agree to, to these rates.
Yeah,
But
of course.
if the cost, like gonna increase by more than 10%,
Yeah.
or like there is no limit mentioned there in the contract that there is a maximum amount of having variations there in proportion to the contract.
So what you are
To the
telling what you are telling that if they are going to instruct a new work which is more than 10%, right? Then we can't oppose that. That's what you're telling, right?
Yes.
Okay. So but 12.3 is telling of what? Can you please read 12.3?
12.3, except as otherwise stated in the contract, the engineer shall proceed in accordance with subclause 3. Okay. If each item of work, the appropriate rate or price for the item shall be the rate or price specified for each item in the contract, or if there is no such item
10%.
specified. However, a new rate or price shall be appropriate for an item if of work if A, one, the measured quantity of the item is changed by more than 10% from the quantity of this item in the bill of the quantities or other schedule. The
So
second criterion is this change in quantity multiplied by such specified rate for this item exceeds 0.01% of the accepted contract amount.
So that's fine.
So I think all of these, criteria
like we are not going to take a whole day, please.
if you want.
We're not going to take a whole day. So what it simply is telling, In the FIDIC, they limited the maximum number of variations that you can go for new items or the existing items or whatever it is. So the awareness that we need to take from FIDIC as a variation, there should be a limitations. And if you are going to write something, there should be a limitations for the work, whether it is new or old or existing. So the fundamental thing that you can't do additional work for the same rate. You can't go for 10% or more than 20% or omission of 30% of the work for the same rate, as I've explained, from 1,000 door to 2 doors, or from 1,000 door to 5,000 door. The client has a demand to come and ask you to change the rate. So there should not be some kind of open-end clause where you have a chance to argue and identify the benefit and get that from that. Okay.
Okay. Actually, in practice, what we do here in our contracts, we amend these clauses. If there is no like existing rates there in the contract, and we want to agree, like in a new variation, like new items of work.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, like treated as cost plus. There is, will be a defined percentage for profit and overhead.
Yeah, that's fine.
Actual
what,
cost plus this
what is the
defined.
link? What is the link between agreeing new item rates and the 10% or 20% limited
What
work?
I want to say here is like it's up to the contractor to accept or to refuse executing these works, but there is no mention of maximum, like limit of varying the works there in the contract.
Okay.
The 10%.
So you mentioned about the rates, which is something gonna be, we are going to agree the rate plus 15% overhead and everything. Why it is linked?
I still cannot get what you mean here.
So you say that for the new items, we're gonna agree the rate plus 15% overhead or 10% overhead or profit, something like that. Why you link that with the 10% additional work? So
because like most of the risk here is transferred to the employer side. If the like if the contractor willing to execute these like additional works,
okay,
they will execute them in this basis, cost plus
cost.
profit. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what the FIDIC is, a standard form of contract. FIDIC is telling that if you have instructed a work where you can identify that element under your contract BOQ, then you can prorate that and use that. If you have identified some kind of new item where the rate is not applicable, then you can go and identify the market rate, or both parties can agree at reasonable price. If both parties cannot agree on that, then they can go and give the chance to the contract administrator to decide it. But whatever it's going to be, the contracts will tell what is the total amount of variation that you can go. So it's a safe side for the parties to make sure that the total price or total variations will not go more than that, right? So it is
will be
nothing
decided by the engineer.
like that. It's going to give you a guidance to tell you, right, don't go and do whatever the variation. For an example, you brought an office to occupy 100 people to do 100 million worth of work. Now the employer is asking you to do a 250 million worth of work with using the same office. Are you going to use same rates, same everything? No. If the work is going to be more than 10%, the rates will be changed. The works will be changed. And you can simply tell them my capacity is not to do the work more than 10% and I'm rejecting it. Or maybe the current market is not allowing me to do more than 10% of the work, I'm rejecting it. It's a simple scenario which is giving a risk allocations between the parties. The employer cannot get benefit from the contractor's money, where the contractors cannot get benefit from the employer's money. It's a very simple scenario limiting both parties' entitlement to get benefit more than 10%. That's it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. And the next one is Syed Moideen. You can switch on, you can unmute in the right corner and ask question. Okay, variation under dispute. In case, where is that? Okay. If variation is under dispute, the contractor has the right to hold that activity. Who will be held responsible for the delay? If variation is under dispute, yes, you have a right. If the variation is instructed in a proper manner, once they instructed the variation will be considered as a scope of work. And if it is finalized variation and you have a dispute on that varied work, or instructed variation, you have all the rights to execute the construction contract by stopping or suspending it. The next one, Tushianten, please. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce his names good. Yes, please. Tushianten?
Hello?
Yes, please.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, good evening. This is regarding value engineering.
Okay.
Let's say if the contractor finds an item in the BOQ which
Mhm.
is underpriced, and
Okay.
and the actual price is for that particular item is going to be high.
Okay.
So if the contractor want to propose something which is still it's going to be higher than the BOQ rate, but still it's going to be lower than the actual rate. So
Yes.
in that instance, does the contractor need to share the saving with the client employer, even though there is a clause 13.2, it's mentioned that there will be a share saving of 50% under the value engineering. Is that
Yeah.
required? And
So
how is going to save that?
if I'm not wrong, your question is in the BOQ we mentioned for an example 10 real, but when I'm going to submit my value engineering, my rate's going to be, I underpriced that, my rate's going to be
Yes.
around 25 real, right? That's what you're asking,
Yes.
right? Right.
Yes, and the actual item is going to cost me 50 real.
Okay. So you're telling I priced 10 real, actually gonna
Yes.
go me 50 real, and
I'm
now
going to
I suggest
Yes.
something 25 real.
Yes, 25. Yes.
Through
Something
the
like that.
value engineering, you are making 25 real, right? That's what you're telling.
Yes.
Okay, what is the guarantee? First, you need to check your contract. Second one, what is the guarantee? The employer will not come and issue a variation to you and telling you to do all the element as a value engineer. Value engineering you can execute first to the work
Yes.
originally existing to you. You can't bring new works. For an example, in your BOQ, you have one work and you price for that 10 real, right? So when you bring value engineering, you can't tell them my price gonna go 25 real. You need to tell them by using 10 real, I'm going to reduce the price to so and so amount. Or else you need to tell them at the time of tender, I priced this element for 10 real. Now it is in the market price, it is 50 real. I can do some kind of value engineering, which will reduce overall price of the contract, regardless of the rate. That will reduce overall price by, for an example, 50,000 real. Still, the rate will be 25 real for my value engineering, but that will overall will reduce the price to 50,000. Of course, if the employer identify that as a beneficial to them, they will agree. But remember one, in future, if the employer wants to instruct you to do the work, will they consider the rate mentioned in the value engineering? No, they will consider the rate mentioned in the BOQ. Again, they're going to ask you to do the work for 10 real, not 25 real or 50 real.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And the next one is Ullah Abate. You can switch on the mic, unmute, and speak.
If employer has omitted a work, FIDIC says that it should not be executed by employer or by others. So how many years FIDIC put restriction on the employer if he omits some work? For how many years he cannot undertake or he cannot award to others? Is there any criteria in some FIDIC book or somewhere? I mean, known to the industry?
Sorry, Mr. Ullah, I did not hear your sentence properly. Can you please go back and start it again, please?
Yeah, if employer has omitted the work,
Okay.
under this omission provision,
Yeah.
for how many years employer cannot award the work to others? Is there some restriction or it's forever?
No, this is what in the FIDIC they didn't mention how many years they can't omit that one. For an example, if they are going to omit the work until they complete the contract, they should not omit it and give that to someone else. If you omit the work, you have no idea to execute it now. Most of the time, this is what client execute. If the work is not urgent to them, and if the work needs to be executed by someone else for benefit, what they will do? Simply they will omit the work. They will tell them, don't do this work, just it. They will stop the work. Once you finalize the contract, then they will issue the work to someone else. The contractor cannot come back and say that, while I was working with you, you awarded initially, you omitted then, now I completed my contract, you awarded that to someone else. They can't come and fight. Why? The employer simply will come and tell that time I was with an intention not to execute the work. Now I got an intention to start the work. We already completed our contract. We already agreed that omission. You are out of my scope. We are out of my sight. Now I'm doing the work. So very important, until you complete that contract, you should not award that. But we don't know what is the intention of the client. But most of the time, the client say that we are not going to award that to someone else. That's my intention. I'm not going to do that. I'm stopping this temporarily or permanently. Later, they can award it. If the contract is completed, you have no link between those two parties. Privy to the contract will be expired. Yeah.
I didn't check, but some professional, he mentioned that some in yellow book somewhere it's mentioned 6 years. So he said it implies that all will be 6 years. But I'm not sure. I haven't read that.
Okay, sometime they might have mentioned something, or maybe they can modify that. But here we are thinking or telling about the red book. In the red book, no limitation.
No. Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I think with that all, we can stop. It's almost 9 o'clock, 1:09. So thank you so much for your wonderful presence. And I hope you all have enjoyed. If I'm not wrong, I think MEQSA will share the presentation slide as well as the video to you all. If you have any questions, try to keep in touch with Infas, who is the secretary of MEQSA. If possible, I'll try to answer for them. And guys, one advice, very basic advice that I need to tell you all. Try to learn as much as possible in terms of commercial by learning APC of RICS. RICS APC provides you millions of information. Even though you have no idea to get your RICS, try to attend any of the APC coachings to learn hundreds of industrial relevant things. Okay. With that all, thank you so much. Have a nice day. Thank you so much for your patience and your questions. Wonderful peoples, wonderful night. Enjoy your weekend. Let's meet in other sessions. Thank you so much, MEQSA, for this arrangement. Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.